Hi everyone, it's your boy Zach, and this is my video about what's wrong with the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies. And kind of like, most franchises, it's going to start out good and then just completely devolve until they need to do a soft reboot or whatever you call it. So, I grew up hating James Bond, absolutely hating it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and by that time it was Roger Moore. The movies were essentially comedies. Nobody pretended they were, anything serious. I liked, my adventure movies to, have some sort of like believing in itself. You can wink at the audience, you can have little bits of comedy, but I don't want a character that's just a joke. And every time you mention James Bond, people would just laugh. Oh, the silly gadgets, the ridiculous names of the characters, ha ha ha, isn't it all so funny and stupid? It's like, that's not what I wanted. And I would catch them on TV and they're pretty painful. I do remember going to go see Timothy Dalton, I think the first one, with my family, and that was really dry, and I was just like, I don't understand why anyone likes James Bond anything. But then when they announced Pierce Brosnan, for some reason I got excited. And it was probably just because I was able to get in on the ground floor of a new James Bond. There's a whole bunch of comic book characters where I bought, the first issue, their first appearance, and I always kind of feel like they call it a plank owner in the Marines. It's, if you're in a unit when it's formed, you're a plank owner. So I always kind of felt like, I sort of co-own these characters. So for me, it was very, very exciting to be around when there was someone new cast. He was younger than Roger Moore. Roger Moore was a weird one where I believe him and Sean Connery are the same age. Same thing happened with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. They're like, Toby's getting kind of old. Let's cast someone the same age, but with a much longer neck. So, comparatively, he looked young. Although, his age is going to be one of the major problems I have with these movies. So he made 4 movies from 1995 to 2002. No, I don't know that off the top of my head. I had to look it up, but I was pretty close. I'm usually good with dates like that. So he goes from essentially his early 40s to about 50. Now, he had been in the running for Bond for a while. I believe first he had to drop out because of a contract, Remington Steele. And I think he also had a wife that passed away, and that pushed it off. So, and this happens a lot. Roger Moore was up for it, and then he couldn't because of The Saint. So it was George Lazenby. It's happened many times with the Bond franchise. So I remember pretty much everyone was happy with his casting, and it was pretty exciting. Goldeneye came out. It got good, solid reviews. Everyone liked it. I remember seeing it in the theaters multiple times. And, it's been shown on cable a million times. So it was an interesting thing where it was a movie at the time that I just absolutely loved. But then I never saw any of the other movies. So I was very confused. I was like, I loved Goldeneye. Everyone loved Goldeneye. How come I didn't go see the other 3, which was Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough, and Die Another Day. And so I watched all of them. Since I had seen Goldeneye a million times, I watched the 2nd through 4th Pierce Brosnan Bond movies, and then I went back to watch Goldeneye, which was kind of interesting. It's a Martin Campbell movie, as is Casino Royale. And I have noticed something with Martin Campbell movies. Every Martin Campbell movie is 15 minutes too long. There's a point where in every one where you just kind of realize, like, the pace is... It's very, eventual. Goldeneye is good. I like it a lot. Pierce Brosnan is, he's still got that fluffy Remington Steele hair. He basically looks the same as Remington Steele, which had started, a decade earlier. It's a soft reboot where it's implied that this is the same Bond as with the previous movies. Dame Judi Dench starts as M, but they point out that she is a new M. I actually forgot about this plot element, is that they make a point that she came from, I guess, the analysis side of MI6, and so there's a couple little lines of dialogue where it's like, oh, you're just running those algorithms and those programs, and you don't know what it's like in the real world. But that's done away with fairly quickly. I'm going to guess there was more of it in the original script. I don't remember them ever bringing that up again. But they point out that, her predecessor has left, and she's new. She doesn't like James Bond. He's a relic of the Cold War. And I remember that was kind of, I mean, this is before, this is just at the beginning when the internet was really getting out to regular people and being a thing. And I remember people talking about it. I was like, oh, they said he's a sexist. It's like, well, everyone says that. It's like the appeal of the character. It's a good, solid adventure. I did not like it as much as I did back in the day. I'm a big fan of the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. Daniel Craig movies that I used to hate, like Quantum of Solace, I like it more every single time I watch it. There's a lot of good stuff in Spectre, but it ends just ridiculous. And I love No Time to Die. Anyway, getting back to Pierce Brosnan. So it's a soft reboot. It's implied that he is the same Bond as in the previous movies. And they basically just get straight down to it. Now, this was Martin Campbell's first Bond movie, but having done some research into the Bond franchise, it's really interesting. Like, they had, in the 1980s, every single Bond movie was directed by the same guy. And then over the Pierce Brosnan, from his second two movies, all the way till No Time to Die, the same two screenwriters have worked on all of the scripts in some capacity. Whether they started the script, whether they did rewrites, whatever. That is crazy to me, that you would have one director direct Bond movies for 10 years, and you had a screenwriting pair write Bond movies for more than 20 years. So what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't shocking. If you've seen the previous Bond movies, it totally matches with them. There's nothing that really sticks out. I think the only thing I would say is, Martin is a more talented director than that kind of journeyman guy they had for the 1980s movies. But nothing's that shocking. There's a doomsday weapon. There's an evil Russian general. There's a sexy villainess. There's a Bond girl who's actually she's actually a pretty good Bond girl. An analyst. One of my favorite things is, just these weird little asides. They have this hacker guy whose catchphrase is, "I am invincible." And I remember loving that when I saw the movie 26 years ago, and it still totally works. I mean, it's so mid-90s, as that those guys who do Caravan of Garbage say. Back in the mid-90s, getting an email was a full screen event. They have these hackers and they'll get like an email, but it has like personalized animations in it. The action was good, specifically the stuff with the vehicles. There's a couple of really good chases. There's a couple of good set pieces. One thing I am going to say about Pierce Brosnan, and this is a problem throughout all four movies, is that he's skinny fat. Skinny fat is when your weight is not technically that high, but you still have a good amount of fat. Now, you might not have some giant belly or love handles, but you just generally look soft. Since Pierce Brosnan was like a pretty boy in the 1980s, they're like, oh, women love him, let's have him shirtless. And it does not sell the later action scenes after you see him shirtless. I would say in all of the movies, he's good with the gunplay. He generally handles a gun well. He does cool poses and, cool little faces when he shoots a machine gun. And he's good in the scenes with the vehicles, but at one point, he has to do like a James Kirk karate chop to the back of the neck of a woman, and it is not convincing at all. Like, you're like, no, that almost looks like a massage. So he's just not physically that imposing. Sean Connery, he was a boxer and he was a bodybuilder, back in the day. Roger Moore isn't exactly scary looking, but he's very tall, and broad-shouldered. George Lazenby looked like he played rugby or something like that. Timothy Dalton, he had a very intense face, so he seemed formidable. But Pierce Brosnan definitely looked like, he doesn't even look like he plays tennis. Like, he looks like he does nothing for exercise. So that really kills it anytime he has to, do fist fights. There's a great character, Alex Trevelyan. At the time, I was reading a lot of Modesty Blaise novels. So Sean Bean, to me, was like the perfect Willie Garvin. And so, to me, it was exciting to see like Willie Garvin there. And it's an interesting character. Again, the movie, except for some of the chase scenes and some of the fights, is not as good as I remember it, but it's quite good. Okay, so let's get to probably the best Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie, which is Tomorrow Never Dies. Now, I did not see this in the theaters, which again is weird. because I saw Goldeneye so many times that I loved it. But there were a couple of things that are off. And this is always kind of rough to say about someone. This is one of those things that I didn't realize when I was younger, but once you get older, you realize you don't age every year. I saw this happen with friends who are older than me. It happened to me. Now I'm watching it happen to my friends who are younger than me. You will go 5 or 6 years and you will essentially look exactly the same. And then you will hit 39 or 40 or 41 and you will suddenly age 5 years in a year or two. And then you will again look the same for about 5 years. So even though it's only 2 years in between Goldeneye and Tomorrow Never Dies, Pierce Brosnan ages 5 years or more. It's actually pretty shocking to realize those movies are only 2 years apart. He spends the next 3 movies looking like a dad. Now, luckily, his second movie is kind of excellent. I don't understand why I didn't see it in the theaters. I mean, I was always poor, but I didn't even see it once at a matinee. So Tomorrow Never Dies has basically, I don't know, like kind of like the best of everything. It has a great villain in Jonathan Pryce, a very, very prescient villain by like 2 decades. He's a media mogul. There's a nice henchman. We get a nice Bond girl who's also an agent. And then we get another Bond girl who's not that great, Terry Hatcher. But the plot is excellent. We get to see more of the military Bond. At one point, he's dressed as Commander Bond. And it's like, oh, he's undercover. It's like, no, he actually is a commander in the British Navy. It's like he's not undercover. So great set pieces. I would say it seems like a smaller movie. It seems a little lower budget. There are some 90s isms that makes me laugh. Like one of the parts is, a GPS unit for a weapon. And whenever they say GPS, they're like, oh, let's check the GPS, Global Positioning System. And then at one point they meet, I'm not shitting you, they say, oh, here's the GPS scientist to confirm the coordinates. And he just opens up this briefcase and he's like, yep, that's a GPS, all right. It's like, was GPS really something that's just like nobody would understand? But then again, in Casino Royale in 2006, Daniel Craig, James Bond, has GPS on his phone. And they give so many close-ups to that phone, like, this is crazy. This guy has GPS on his cellular telephone. So, fantastic movie. Absolutely great. I love it. I recommend that the most out of all of them. Then we get to The World Is Not Enough, which has a freaking awesome theme song, by the way. That one, this is where it starts to go off the rails. Now, we do get to see some suave Bond and another good vehicle scene with a boat. But we get a really weak villain. Now, he sounds kind of cool. He's got a bullet in his brain, and he can't feel pain. That rhymed unintentionally. But he's this tiny little guy. He's weak. And then we find out later, it's kind of like Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, where he's essentially the henchman of the real villain, spoiler, who's the woman. Now, I gotta say, the female lead / Bond villainess is an absolutely fantastic character. She's basically a hostage who gets Stockholm Syndrome and then ends up joining the hostage taker and kind of becoming his boss. And it's done very well over the course of the movie. The problem is there's some really trash set pieces. There's a lot of boring stuff about pipelines and like the Caucasus. And then I always hate when they bring back a character like, oh, do you remember the Russian guy from Goldeneye? No? Would you like to see him drown in caviar? No? What's wrong with you? It has a really interesting arc for what seems to be the Bond girl, but is actually the Bond villain. Another Bond girl, what's her name, who was married to Charlie Sheen. Just awful. But there are some good parts to it. Which brings us to Tomorrow Never Dies. Holy shit. Now, first of all, I remember everyone hating this movie and just mocking it when it came out. But I also remember massive publicity for it. And I guess it actually did fairly well financially. It had publicity for a few things. Number one, Halle Berry was in it, and they were going to spin her off into her own franchise. Number two was that Madonna was in it. Oh my gosh, Madonna. I wonder if she'll wear a bustier. Like, there was a time, 20 years ago where Madonna being in something was... Actually, even then, it was kind of like This isn't like 1992, it's 2002. Like Madonna, who cares? She has an okay theme song, Die Another Day. Now here's the deal about this one. It's the director is Lee Tamahori, and it's got a really, how did they used to say back in the day? A boffo opening scene. In North Korea, there's this cool hovercraft, and then Bond even gets captured. I was going to say he's a POW, but I guess that's not the right nomenclature. And then they have, the opening song, and then they show, usually some sort of animation or something like that, 3D animation. This one is really trippy because it's Bond being tortured by extremes of heat and cold, and also being tortured with electricity. And then the animation for the theme song is these female forms made out of ice, fire, and electricity. So it's actually fairly emotional. Once you get it, you're like, oh, this is him hallucinating. And then he gets released, and there's some, okay stuff in there. And there's even a great bit where it almost turns into like Casino Royale. There's a bit where he's in Cuba. He's got a pistol and a flashlight. And there's a whole scene of just him acquiring that pistol and flashlight. And you're like, wow, this is like really like bare bones. It's just him. There's one point where he sneaks behind a door by jumping out a window and then going past and then jumping in another window. And you just have to see it. There's this person passed out in a wheelchair and he like pushes into the wall. But I was like, am I nuts? Or was that little bit of how he snuck past some guards cooler than like these massive action scenes? And again, he's just got like this revolver and a flashlight, I think. He goes and he infiltrates a lair, and you're like, this is good. I don't know why it has this terrible. Then we get to the Ice Palace, and holy shit, this turns into a freaking Joel Schumacher Batman movie. There's this giant fake looking ice palace, and the villain, holy shit, don't even get me started on this villain. So the villain is, at the beginning, he's just a North Korean army officer. He's got a dad who's a general. There's some issues there. But he's a good, tough guy. And then the story is, this is so stupid. So he gets surgery, genetic surgery, to make him look like this blonde-haired white guy. And then he establishes himself as a media mogul in an elaborate plan to, it's a James Bond movie. But then later, they establish that he doesn't sleep, ever. So he has to make his dreams happen in real life. Okay, this is 3 different characters you have smashed into the same character. So we do get like a really cool fencing scene. That's a scene that Madonna is in. But then we go to the goddamn Ice Palace for an hour, and that is freaking god awful. The whole thing is stupid. It feels like something out of Batman and Robin. The ice looks fake. The other thing that drove me fucking nuts is at one point they leave the Ice Palace. So you're like, fuck yeah, we're done with this stupid ass Ice Palace. But apparently they spent a lot of money on that Ice Palace. So they really want to get their money's worth. So they go back to the Ice Palace. And you might say, why did we leave? Oh, to have a big long chase on the ice. Then they go back to the Ice Palace. And then like 10 minutes later, they go back onto the ice for another long. I have never seen this happen in any movie. Now, yeah, you got Fast and Furious movies where there'll be a car chase and then another car chase like a couple minutes later. The other car chase will be in a different locale with different vehicles, or at least one will be day and one will be night. No, this is the same area, just with different vehicles with the same characters. It's literally like 10 minutes later. So then we get an end, which is the villain is wearing a Nintendo Power Glove. I'm not shitting you. And he has this ridiculous, very plastic looking armor. And they're in this, it feels like the end to a Marvel movie. It's just completely clownish, ridiculous. At one point they have this villainess by, I forget her name. She was in The World's End. A fairly classy English actress. And then like out of nowhere, she's just in a bra trying to fence Halle Berry. It's like, she's just in a bra. Like you don't even have one shot where she has a shirt and then it gets ripped off by the sword. She's just in, a bomber And, okay, fine, whatever. Nothing matters. I do not understand why Pierce Brosnan thought he was going to get another Bond movie after that, because that was just awful. I do imagine how heartbroken he was to find out that that was his last movie, because he really went out with just complete crap. And again, the first hour is just fine. The fencing scene is freaking fantastic, but they weirdly tried to mush 3 different villains into one character, and it's completely insane and does not work. So overall, it wasn't good. That was a long 7 years. I really think the main problem was that Brosnan should have been a Bond in his 30s. Sean Connery was in his early 30s when he started as Bond. And that seems kind of ideal. And yes, I'm going to watch all the Sean Connery Bond movies and then do a video on that. I just started on Dr. No. But yeah, he basically started too late. He aged very quickly between the first and second movies. The following 3 movies, well, the second one's great, but 3 and 4 are bad to awful. And it was just all kind of unfortunate. Like, you end up feeling sorry for Pierce Brosnan a lot of times. So that's all I got to say on that one. Starts out solid, gets better in the second one. Third one has a lot of problems. Fourth one goes to complete shit. And I think it's like 2.5 hours, but only the first hour is good. So if you haven't seen the movies, actually, I don't think it's possible you haven't seen Goldeneye. I feel like everyone on the planet has seen Goldeneye. In the late 1990s, that thing was on the USA Network like every 4 hours for like 5 years straight. If you haven't seen the movies, I would definitely recommend Tomorrow Never Dies. And if you only want to see one of them, again, I would recommend Tomorrow Never Dies. It's absolutely fantastic. So anyway, thanks for watching. And my next video, I don't know. Sean Connery has a lot of James Bond movies. That might take me a while to work my way through all of them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.